there's nothing worse for me than meeting someone and then seeing that like light go out in their eyes. When I say, I work in the realm of sustainability, I'm like, come back to me. We can still be friends.
Yeah.
And we don't have to, it doesn't have to end here.
We get it on a personal level. We understand it. In this episode, you'll get to know Samata Pattinson, the sustainability pioneer. And you'll hear the story of how she developed a partnership with the Academy of Motion Pictures to help celebrities like Billie Eilish wear sustainable gowns at the Oscars. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Project. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project. This is a show where I teach my children how to be successful through the life stories of others, but you get to come along for the ride no matter what your age is. In case it's your first time hearing me, your first time for this podcast, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've reached millions of people through my online courses and helped them be more successful. With this show, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to create something lasting as a legacy, in particular for my family. I wanted to help them succeed, but I thought you would also enjoy learning along with them. So, I speak to some of the most successful people I've met. These are people who have achieved not just career or financial success, but they've also achieved multifaceted success in many areas of their lives. So what I'm looking for in each interview are universal principles of success, things that you can apply in your career and life right now, today. So as you listen to today's episode, look for something you can do today or this week at the latest. And if you do that, you'll make my guest a part of your life forever. Samata Pattinson is a British-born Ghanaian entrepreneur working in fashion, film, and media. As CEO of Black Pearl, she's passionate about cultural sustainability and connecting people and the planet through the fashion industry. Samata has worked with pioneers such as Vivienne Westwood, Louis Vuitton, and Tesla. Her designs and thought leadership work have frequented the red carpet at the Oscars since 2012. She authored the Sustainable Style Guide for the 95th Annual Academy Awards. She's also a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and sits on the Sustainability Council for Rothis. Samata, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it as well because you have such a unique career path. And I really am looking forward to hearing your perspective on life and your career. So I ask everyone the same question when we start because we're telling your career journey. When you were a teenager, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it what you're doing now or was it something else?
I think when I was a teenager, it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to be. It was who I wanted to be. I think I always just wanted to be somebody that was brave, that took risks, that was curious about the world, and who put themselves in a position where they could have really new experiences. So I actually didn't really know what that would look like in the form of a career. I knew it would intersect with probably something culture-led, something around creativity and self-expression, possibly something that was maybe public-facing. But outside of that, I wasn't 100% sure. So I didn't have the foresight then to really have too much of a concrete idea of what I wanted to be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So those words, those phrases that you used to describe yourself, were those very conscious things? Had you sat down and written it out? Or was it more just a general feeling?
It was a general feeling. I always felt like there would be adventures in my life. I always felt that I would meet really interesting people, that I would be brave enough to put myself in spaces where I could intersect with people that either I looked up to or revered, or who had taken an unconventional path. And I don't know why that is. I have such a cool family. My siblings were always really outgoing. I have such great parents. So I think I just grew up in this household where you weren't afraid to express yourself. You weren't afraid to go out of your comfort zone. And so that that might have been why I always had this feeling that I would go on many adventures. And it was probably somewhat of a running joke in my family at some extent, what will she do next kind of thing. So maybe that
Okay.
fed it.
Were you doing things that were unusual at the time, like early on?
I think I was definitely odd. Just and when I say odd, just unconventional.
Hmm.
I would take apart our kind of hard drive of our computer and try and put it back together again, or I
Interesting.
would find it really interesting to make things from existing things that maybe were considered waste, or I would always want how I dress or what I was putting on myself to be completely different to what my two sisters had. So I would look at things in a way where I'd want to deconstruct them and make them into something completely unique and different. I didn't want to go and get what everyone else had. I wanted to see what everyone else had and say, what don't they have? So I think just my way of thinking and my way of being meant that for a while I just felt like I didn't really fit in anywhere. But then there was a strange comfort in that. At points, I quite liked feeling odd, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I think that itself can be a value, and the world needs some oddity, doesn't it,
I
to
think
to
so.
mix things up and disrupt the norm.
Mm.
So it sounds like many of the things that you were doing early on are similar to the kind of things that you're doing now. Is that safe to say?
I think you're right, Dave. I think what I was doing earlier was inherently trying to stay connected with some form of inner creativity. So there's definitely that. That's a good point. There was something about looking outside of what I was being given to see what I wasn't being given. So that could be with curriculum, what I was being advised to study versus what I felt I should be studying that was left out. And again, looking at things that potentially were considered non things or considered waste and saying, how can I take that and that make something beautiful? So,
Mm.
yes, I think that's a good connection to have made that, yeah, at some point, maybe we all do that to a degree. I don't know what you think.
I mean, certainly, I think we have experiences that point us in the right direction, or we start to
Mm,
say, "Oh, I like to do that."
mm,
So, but certainly, that kind of thing that you're doing was unique, which
mm.
doesn't surprise me because what you do now is unique.
Thank
When I
you.
was doing research for this interview, what I found interesting was your degree, because it wasn't in design, it wasn't in fashion, it had nothing to
Mm.
do that. So, can you talk to me a little bit about your education at Queen Mary's University in London?
Yes, it really wasn't. And thank you for doing that research because essentially my university degree, and I can say this without any hesitation, was a degree I undertook from my parents. I come from a West African family. I have two Ghanaian parents, very traditional, who
Mm,
came over to the UK so that my dad could study at Cambridge University to do his PhD. So I think with that kind of cultural upbringing comes this level of expectation and hope for your kids. Oh, I've come to this institution that's, renowned. There's lots of opportunities for me as an academic. I want my kids to have a strong academic foundation. And I think the idea of what a strong foundation meant, even though it's evolved now, for me, it meant there are a few degrees you can choose from.
and what were you studying?
Well, so my GCSEs and A levels, I did like my A levels were biology, chemistry, maths, physics. I did Japanese, French floor. So they definitely weren't in any way creative. And then for my degree, I studied economics, finance, and management. It was literally kind of this conversation I had with my parents that was at the time very a source of great angst.
Okay.
Yeah, it was painful. I didn't want to do that degree. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more creative. I didn't know exactly what that thing was. So it kind of got to that point, Dave, where you don't really know exactly what you want to do, but you have a feeling it's not this. Whilst you're figuring out what you want to do, we want you to do this. That's what I did. But I made sure that I
Okay.
was in London to do it.
Well, I'm fascinated by it and also not surprised, because one pattern that has come up, because part of what I'm doing is I'm interviewing people looking for principles of universal success.
Nice.
I don't think I've interviewed someone so far who has not in some way studied business.
Wow.
It no matter what it is that they do, whether they're a piano teacher or they're a design expert, in some way they got that education.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you still feel angst about it,
I
but I
don't.
would say that that's part of your success is that you had that background. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think you've completely hit the nail on the head. At the time, I was reluctant, but now I can see how useful it's been. And I think, to be honest with you, because I also think that when you're finishing your degree or your A levels, you've experienced so little of the world. Like, even if you've been fortunate enough to travel every summer holiday and every Christmas and you have friends all over the world, there's still a sense of growing into who you want to be. So you still might not have a commitment to what you want to do. Some people have always known, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a vet, I want to be this. And that's great for them. But I think for the vast majority of people, your life experiences inform who you become. They inform what you want to do. And you're still having life experiences. And I agree with you because the principles of business are applicable whatever you do. They're applicable if you're an artist, you need to know how to grow your business, you need to know how to sell your trade. So I think you're completely right. Now I look back and I say, okay, that macro and microeconomics course, all those finance fundamentals of finance, I'm not mad at
Yes.
them. I get
Yes.
it. But at the
Well, and also
time,
economics in particular too, I think is special because it
yeah,
it gives you a bird's eye picture of the world. It gives
yeah,
you a way to recognize trends that
yeah,
are happening in whatever
absolutely.
industry that you're in.
Absolutely. And it means that you are not boxed out of conversations that will help you understand what's happening in the world around you. And I think that is really, really crucial. I mean, I think regardless of what you do, some understanding of the interplay of economics, global economies, how trade works, how things come to be and how businesses run and essentially influence all of us is never a bad thing to have. But I think at the time when you're thinking, I don't know what I want to do, but this doesn't feel it, 3 years can feel like 10 years. But when I
Right.
graduated, now I see how useful it was. So I'm so happy that I did that degree.
Yeah. Is there a particular mentor or a particular
Mm,
moment that you
mm.
reflect back on and say, oh, that in particular, that person had such an influence in my career that I have now?
Yes, there were probably two people, and one of them I'll never forget. I'll never get, both of them are kind of absolutely invaluable, but one in particular was this lady called Valentina Vatistas. And I remember I was just finishing my degree and I'd wandered into Kings Road into this gorgeous boutique. It was 3 floors of international brands. And I knew I
Mm,
loved fashion as a form of self-expression, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to fit into the industry. And just this woman kind of essentially glided over to me, and the connection we had was pretty instant. Like, it was an instantaneous sense of seeing each other. We started to speak. We probably sat in the shop, and there was this area that she had designed to replicate the circular meeting point of tribal chiefs because she was from Nigeria. So it was a circular
mm,
area where you could sit down, and we sat opposite each other in this circular meeting space. And she was just throwing these questions at me. And some of the questions I'd never been asked before, and some of them I knew so well from the depth of my soul, but she was intrigued. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? What is it about this space that interests you? She was just going at it. And I was just firing back. And at the end of that conversation, she said, why don't you come and do some marketing for us at the boutique here? So it was something I did as a part time role. But she was a mentor to me because she had this great wisdom, this great experience, but she had this open heart for incubating people. Her shop was actually called the
mm.
Eleval Fashion Incubator. She felt that it doesn't matter what stage you are in your career, if you're beginning or established, everyone needs somewhere they can go and be incubated. And she just fed into me. She just affirmed me. She showed me her statements. She showed me the pictures and the decks from designers that were selling to her. She told me what she looked for. She just gave me all this information, and it just felt like there was no strings attached. And I
Oh,
felt so grateful for that. I felt so grateful just to feel that there wasn't this sense of this is what I want in return. She seemed to have a genuine joy for giving. And I appreciated that a lot.
that's such a wonderful moment. Have you had the opportunity to pay that forward with anybody,
I
where
have.
you have done the same thing for someone else?
That's a good question as well. I've mentored and incubated lots of different emerging designers, students.
When you say incubated, could you describe a little bit more what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. I haven't used it since I worked with her. I'm really enjoying that you've made me think of this time because it was a magical
Sure.
time. So thank you. But when she's talked about incubating, she talked about creating a space that had a sense of calm, a sense of tranquility, that was
Mm,
feeding nutrients, feeding something that would allow somebody to grow into their ecosystem. So, what she would do is she would give a space where you could come and sit down. She would give quiet. She would give almost a blank slate for you to imagine up and out. She would ask you questions and then give you the seeds and water those ideas. She would prompt you if you hesitated to say something. She would say, no, say that thing you were going to say that you think's silly. Say it anyway. And then you would say
mm,
it and she would feed that idea. She would just not even troubleshoot with you because it was almost like there wasn't a negative word attached to anything. Instead of saying a problem, she would say like an interesting obstacle. Instead of saying she'd find ways that you felt that you were just feeding something and allowing it to grow and you weren't pruning anything that was fledgling. You were just allowing it to grow like a baby. And she handled you with care. So I like this idea that, and I don't know what you think about that, but that people's ideas should be handled with care.
oh, I
That,
love that.
right? It was special because even if you don't respect the idea, you should respect that they come from somebody. And so you treat that with care because that could be a brave act for the person to share that idea. So that's, I think, does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And so then the next question is, how are you doing that with other people now? Right?
Mm.
Is it the same thing, or are there other moments where you're adding your own flavor to it?
I like that. Well, I try and do any incubation I try and do is really around supporting people with resources and knowledge because what I feel that I have a good understanding of is sustainability from the perspective of how you design things, processes, and experiences to be better for people and planet in a nutshell. So, what I try and do is just feed people's ideas with the knowledge I have, or the resources I have, or the community I have. So, even if I don't have that answer, I'm not snipping it down. I'm saying, oh, that's something worth exploring. Here's somebody that can further incubate that idea. Here's something that could be useful for you. Here's some resources. Here's some reading. Here's something I learned. Is that useful to you? So I try and do it
Mm,
in that way. And then through my work, I think it's incubating through education as well. So it's helping people understand things so that they can make different choices and grow in their own knowledge. So that's
yeah.
probably a big part of it as well.
Well, what I like about how you describe that is it shows your leadership of being aware of what people need. I think sometimes as leaders, we just assume or we just have our own playbook and we push that on
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is you're kind of saying you're looking at what someone might need and then providing that
Oh,
to them.
I'm trying because, but also I try and be aware that I'm also not able to always, like, really always get that right. And that's why I'm trying to work on things like language, process communication, like things that help you to understand the things people are saying to you and the things they're not saying that they want to say. And that's why a big part of the work I'm passionate about is around language with sustainability, because I think language is a tool that can bring people in or it can design people out. And trying to pay attention to how people
Interesting.
communicate their needs and wants through what we're doing is important. In sustainability, I don't know, I'd love to know what you think about this, but I think sometimes it comes across as a worthy space, a judgmental space where people feel
Mm.
shamed out of the conversation. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really interesting because when I was thinking about this interview and we had the conversation at the beginning about
Yeah.
how are we going to describe you, right? The sustainability pioneer, right? Which I think is a great phrase. But I do think there is a little bit of an intimidation factor. I do
Yes.
feel like, especially for someone who doesn't understand the concept of sustainability or the
Mm.
principle of it,
Yeah.
I do think there's a little bit of fear. I think it's like,
Mm.
is this am I going to be preached to? But it sounds like you're very conscious of that and trying to find ways to make it the conversation about sustainability sustainable itself,
Ex-
right?
Absolutely. I mean, There's nothing worse for me than meeting someone and then seeing that like light go out in their eyes. When I say, I work in the realm of sustainability, I'm like, come back to me. We can still be friends. And
Yeah.
we don't have to,
But
it doesn't
the
have to
thing
end
is,
here.
we get it on a personal level. We
Yeah.
understand it, right? Like
Yeah.
when, as an individual, as a person, my lifestyle isn't
Mm,
sustainable. I
mm,
can't keep staying up late. I can't keep doing these things to my body. We understand that on a personal level.
yeah.
And so I think if we expand that conversation to a bigger picture, a
Mm.
corporation, a culture, a country, whatever it is, I think this principles still apply, right?
Absolutely. And actually, fundamentally, what I try and do through my work is to remind people that you're already participating. So even with the educational work or the projects with the awards, the Oscars, all I've tried to do with that specific history of work is show the ways that we are already participating or can participate and show accessible solutions that really anyone can do. If you're talking about sustainable fashion, for example, buying secondhand or vintage, looking after the things you have, mending or considering having your stuff tailored isn't intimidating. And the reality is, actually, most people are already doing those things. So the way I try and do it is say, you're already doing this, and I want you to understand the positive impact of what you're already doing. And then here are
Mm,
some other accessible things that you can also do that will help all of us collectively get to this better place, as opposed to saying, this is all awful and you're really responsible for this and you need to be a better person. I don't
yeah.
think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to kind of educate and show you're already in this, and here are some other ways you can be participating, and this is the positive impact that making that decision can make. And if I can do that with anyone and everyone, I feel that I'm being really successful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So that's a good place for us to transition back to the chronological story here.
Okay.
How did you transition from your graduating in economics and business to becoming a speaker and mentor in the fashion industry?
So I finished my degree, and whilst I was studying my degree, I was always working. So, I studied, I'd go and do this job with the boutique, or I would, I was always working. I found a community that I attached to, built good relationships with, and through that, work and opportunities came. So I would do, I'd go and do some marketing work here or some PR work here, telling the stories of what was being done. And then ultimately, I think the progression of meeting fellow creatives, meeting business leaders, but also meeting creatives, being invited to speak. I was invited to address two sitting British prime ministers, Gordon Brown
Hmm.
and David Cameron. I was invited to
Wow.
speak on sustainability and entrepreneurism and just tell these different stories about how we build an industry that speaks to young designers as well, that supports them with the right tools. Because when it comes to the creative industry, you can be an amazing creative, but again, it comes back to that degree again, Dave. If you can't pull together the financial side of what you're doing, or if you can't put together an investor deck, then you will struggle when it comes to scalability. So I think what I was always trying to do was pull in the stuff I'd learned begrudgingly and make it relevant to this amazing creative community that I kept interacting with when I was in London. They were everywhere. And so I just kept being asked to speak. I started to write down my experiences, and that's when I wrote the Fashion Designer's Resource book that was picked up by Bloomsbury. And again, it's always just been about trying to just tell a story that's real, that's representative, that's relatable, and that can be accessed by people. And that was just, how I started to progress into more and more and more becoming more aware of sustainable fashion and understanding that there was a whole other side of the industry that I wasn't fully engaged with.
So there are a couple of things in that story that stands out to me.
Mm,
First, let's just talk about, to use the word entrepreneurism. I would say
mm,
entrepreneurship. I don't know if
mm.
that's just an across the pond sort of thing.
Yes.
But what is the role that entrepreneurism plays in
Mm,
what you're doing?
mm. It's really interesting because the more I think about it, I think about entrepreneurs and I think about how they approach business, but also their lives. There's something, first of all, very intentional, very sustained, very persistent. and I would almost say stubborn about the way that you have to embody being an entrepreneur to be successful, to build something that you believe wholeheartedly can have some sort of an impact in the public sphere, in the private sector, whatever that is. And all the entrepreneurs I've come across have some of those similar character traits. There's a willingness to listen, but there's also this area that you cannot broach. There's this self-belief, this unwavering commitment and self-belief in an idea or a concept that has to be taken to the finish line. But there's also this resourcefulness and this agility because there's a shortage of finances. There's always something that's lacking that's requiring these pivots. You know,
Yeah, agility is a great word
oh,
for
good.
that.
Okay. Right. It's kind
Yeah.
of exactly so agile. And when I think about sustainability, it's exactly the same. This unwavering belief that there is a way that we can be doing things that's better for people and planet. There's a space where you and I can have a conversation, and then there's a space where my principles and my beliefs just I will not budge on my commitment to serving the planet and its global communities. There's a resourcefulness because to me, true sustainability actually comes from deficit. It comes from this idea that we don't have enough. How do we look after the little we have? And so you're not wasting, you're looking at that thing you were going to throw away and saying, how can it become something else? You know, it's this principle of efficiency and frugality, but also therefore abundance, because I'm not coming from a space of desperate need. I'm coming from a space of I have everything I need and I will take what I need and nothing excess of that. And there's joy in
Yeah.
that, you know, and I think there's some interplay there. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and there's always a solution. I'm enjoying this conversation in particular because I don't know if you've seen, but I do an occasional special episode with my kids where I'll sit down with them and I'll talk about a principle. And right now, the one that I'm gearing up for is entrepreneurship and talking to them about that mindset of there is a solution. There is, and it's also, there's always a problem. There's always a problem that we can solve. But also we're really confident that we can solve it through whatever resources that we have. I don't know if you use the word bootstrapping much, but that's very common
Yes.
in entrepreneurial circles.
Yeah.
And I like that idea, and I can see how that fits into what you do with design.
Absolutely. Well, it has to because so what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm intersecting with global design brands, small and emerging, and I'm working with them to see and show how their processes can become more sustainable. So there has to be an element of what do you already have in house? What exists that is in abundance and being wasted? What do you struggle with doing in a way that's more sustainable? What do you see your business doing and think, oh, I just wish there was a better way to do this? You know, inherently it's wrong. I wish there was a better way to do this. How are you interacting with the people in your business? How much representation, how much social and environmental dialogue is there within your business? And how are you transmitting your commitment to doing better for people and planet externally? So there's all these conversations happening. And so part of that has to recognize that either we're creating a budget or we're either taking or we're creating a new budget for this, we're investing resources, or we're moving funds from one place to another. And in that, there is a tightening happening. There is, okay, we have to tone this part down so that we can more heavily invest in this. And so there is an element of how can we be more resourceful with what we have? So definitely there's an element of that. But I think also what we're trying to do is also through academics and educational institutions is building frameworks. So there's an element of we have to really assign a realistic budget and a realistic financial structure to sustainability. Because this idea that oh, it's too expensive, it keeps ignoring the fact, but well, these costs are being absorbed by people and planet. So actually, it's not too expensive. But what's happening right now is you think what you're paying is fair, but what you're paying is being subsidized by humans and by our planet. So we're trying to get to a more equitable space. And that's another conversation we should be having. That's a conversation I try and have.
Well, I'm assuming it can still be profitable too.
Exactly. Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
a business case for sustainability. Even when we talk
Yeah.
about decarbonizing fashion's value cycle and kind of really tackling the relationship between fashion and climate, we've done studies have shown that there's 55 to 60% cost savings by applying decarbonization methods and processes to an entire fashion value cycle. So it's not that it just saves costs, but it also makes money. So I think
Yeah.
it comes back to language, Dave, and this idea of how do we discuss these things in a way that makes them more appealing, more accessible, more authentic, and less worthy, just practical conversations about future proofing your business, making sure that you're, things like that.
It's funny as you're talking about this, I realized that we have an accidental connection
Oh,
that you're probably not aware of with this. So in my book, The Myth of Multitasking,
mm-hmm.
which is a story-based thing teaching it, I had a consultant go into a company and consult them, and the company was called Green Garb. And it
Mm.
was, I think the tagline was, the clothes Mother
Bingo.
Nature intended. So I,
Oh,
I
nice.
I confess it wasn't like I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I was like, what would be an interesting company for this story to take place?
Green
Apparently, I
Garb.
did a sustainable fashion company for that.
Oh, I love that. When did you do this? Sorry, when did this take place?
So the first edition came out
Mm.
in 2008.
Wow,
Uh,
trailblazer.
so yeah, and we just released last year the second edition of
Oh,
it.
fantastic.
I know that there's an aspect of what you've done that when we were doing the research, I think a lot it'll capture people's imagination, which is the Oscars.
Mm.
Talk to me about your interaction or your role in what people were actually wearing on the red carpet for the Oscars.
Absolutely. So around 2011, I won a design competition, and it gave me the opportunity to essentially start understanding what sustainable design looked like in the apparel industry. So, really deep diving. I read so many books. One of my favorites was Eco Fashion by Sass Brown. And I just started to really have a more, I would say, robust understanding of what it actually meant, because it was quite conceptual for me at the time. It could be a bit of this, it's a bit of that. It's for the planet, it's for communities, but I couldn't have given you frameworks or philosophies and just, more concrete, deep, meaty stuff had I not started on that journey. So I won this competition. It took me to Los Angeles. And through that, I started to work more officially in the space of sustainable fashion. In 2012, I had the good luck and fortune to essentially be part of developing a partnership with the Academy. So I'd reach out to designers and say, look, we want to pair you with this talent, and we ask you to create a sustainable gown for the Oscars. So I would have to,
Hmm.
think about who the talent would be. And that would be a number of factors. Might they be going to the Oscars? Have they used their voice in this way before? And then I'd also have to look at the designers and pair them and then come up with a concept for how we could deliver the gown sustainably.
For when you say the talent, who
Mm,
are some of the people who have worn what
of
you
course.
created?
Of course. So, and I wasn't the one making it. So more often the year that I won, I made my gown, had my gown created, and then went and walked red carpet in LA. But going forward,
Ah, okay.
yes, but going forward, worked with emerging designers. Some were emerging contest winners. Some of them were established fashion houses. Some of them were emerging fashion houses like Louis Vuitton, or a small designer like Laura Baschi or Benedetti Life. And then I would go and do outreach to talent agents and publicists and pitch them and say, look, it's amazing red
Mm.
carpet. We'd love this person to step up on the carpet and have, something to say beyond just a brand name. And so I secured talent such as Naomi Harris from Skyfall, Emma Roberts, Lakeith Stanfield. We've had so many amazing people. We had Laura Harrier, we've had Billie Eilish, her mother Maggie Baird, Tati Gabrielle, just host of amazing talents. And that's for the Oscars red carpet, wearing everything from, a jacket made from recycled plastic to talk about the fact that plastic is a problem. What are we doing with plastic waste? Across to gowns that were dyed with natural, like plants and flowers, talking about more safe dyeing techniques. We've just had a host of incredible messages on that carpet.
So you actually had to do outreach to
Yes.
convince people. And the reason why I'm highlighting that, I just
Yes.
got done interviewing someone else who's a master of sales, David Bezant.
Okay.
We have another episode with him, but he was talking
Nice.
about how sales is persuasion. And so
Mm.
with that was also part of your career that you probably didn't think, I'm going to have to start selling this to someone and convincing them to wear this.
I have 100% never been asked this question before. I've also never even
Okay.
thought about it this way before, Dave. This is so exciting for me because no, I never saw it that way. I had to pitch the talent, I had to pitch the brand, and then I had to help them build the story and then fill in the background. So, okay, this is a fabric we're choosing, these are the dyes we're choosing, this is how we're finishing this. Let me build the sustainability profile for this look. Then I would write those talking points and give them to the talent and work with them so that they would feel that this is something they were comfortable saying. Make sure that it reflected them. Because I could say, okay, this is the sustainability profile of this gown or this tuxedo, but I need to know your perspective on this. What are you passionate about? And they would say, oh, I'm passionate about vintage, or, I'm passionate about this. And so then we would weave that into it as well, so that it was not just a message track that we were creating, but it was them. It was something that felt true to them. One example I'll give you is we worked with Marley Matlin, and so she's deaf. So it was amazing for me because one of the things I was trying to do when I chose her was show that these conversations belong to all of us. And there has to be a conversation about accessibility that includes ASL, that includes the disabled community,
Hmm.
that shows that there's not just one form of language, which is us speaking out loud like this and you hearing me, but there is a whole audience of people that will be brought into this conversation when this beautiful woman is on that red carpet signing what she's wearing. So it was just, my passion's always been, how do we do these conversations in cool and interesting ways? So someone's sitting there and Marley's signing that she's wearing this gown. It's made from this biodegradable fabric and it's got dead stock material that was going to be thrown away. And someone from the deaf community is now brought in because she's somebody that resonates with them. So it's just so, there's been so many fun adventures with that, honestly.
Yeah, and the presentation, the preparation that you had to
Yeah.
make, and also just getting to know it, and it's a different thing every time. That sounds fascinating. Sounds like a lot of fun to do that.
Yes. Yeah, truly it was. And I think what I learned was this red carpet, and that was, I did that, for since 2000, from 2012 to 2023. And what I learned from that was this red carpet, it's just a platform for conversation. It's glamorous and it's glitzy and it's so on, but these are also just people who are essentially having this really special moment in their career, but also using that window of conversation to just expand the dialogue a little bit into this other area. And I personally was deeply grateful for that because, to be honest, they could easily have just gone to the Oscars, had a great time, and not been willing to talk about this other thing, fashion, 20% of global water pollution, all of these things that we were just peppering out. I'm so grateful that we had the chance to have those conversations too.
Yeah, well, and there's real power in enlisting other people to spread the message.
Yes.
So it's not just you, but your voice is amplified through the platforms and the followers of others.
Exactly.
Which again goes back to that persuasion, that
Yes.
influencing people. And the more and more you do that, I'm assuming the more and more adept you become at doing it.
I hope so. And also, I think we have to recognize that the conversation about sustainability, this idea that as humans, we're in the Anthropocene, we're having huge impact on the planet. Actually, essentially, we're living as if we have 1.5 planets to spare. There are already enough clothes made today for the next 6 generations. So, this idea that, wait, there has to be a different way we're doing things is important. But the way people are responding has changed. In the beginning, there was more pushback. Oh, I don't really want to be thought of as this like barefoot hippie. Like these are things people would say, really wildly inaccurate and kind of quite offensive statements. Now they're saying, oh, I've heard about this. Or they're saying, oh, I spoke to my friend about this, and microplastics from polyester clothing is a big problem. So now we're trying to buy more natural fibers. Now the conversations are becoming easier because it's a conversation that's being had citizen to citizen, B to C, C to B. It's happening in all directions. So people's responsiveness means I don't have to be so persuasive. My work is easier because they're already, to be honest, halfway there. They're just looking for the knowledge and the information to make the different decisions, but they're actually more receptive now than they were many years ago.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I'm just speaking for myself. I
Yeah.
feel like it's been an evolution for me
Yes.
to slowly start to understand, and recognize not just the value of it, but recognize that it's not as hard as maybe we thought it
Yeah.
was to do these
Absolutely.
things. And
Absolutely.
that's what I like about your approach too, is like you said, you're trying to put it in a way that's palatable, that's
Mm.
meets people where they are for it. So I think that's wonderful. So we've
Yeah.
talked about the sustainability of the planet and brands and design and stuff. How are you sustainable on a personal level that support sustainability?
So, what I try and do personally is find, first of all, I'm a big believer in discernment. So, I've actually stopped when I was kind of maybe doing my GCSEs and so on. I would literally go shopping every weekend or at least twice a week. I'd get so many things, and I was just this kind of person. I was always switching up my fashion, my clothes. I'm first of all a big fan of discernment. I love this idea of buying with, well, this long term idea of what do I need this for? Why am I buying this? There's something about going into a retail space that is, I feel, if you do it too much, it's kind of this bombardment of you need this, you need this, you need this. Even when you're walking to the till and you're doing your zigzagging, and there's just those like strategically placed trays, oh, let me just pick up a couple of these because they're here. Oh, let me just get this. You get to the till and you've got maybe 30% of the stuff you're carrying you didn't even need. There's something about discernment that plays a role in how I approach shopping. And I feel quite proud of the fact that I don't allow myself to be actively sold to. I go for what I want, and maybe occasionally there might be something I see and think, oh, I didn't plan to have that, but that's something I'll have for a while. But I'm not somebody that will leave a shop and have like 4 to 5 things I never planned to have, but I just got sold to. And that's because I understand how our industry works. I love the fashion industry, I love it as a space, but it is built on this idea that people need to buy things for it to succeed, and they need to feel that they need new things a lot of the time. You have brands putting like up thousands of new styles on their website a day. So this idea that we have loads we're pushing towards you and want you to buy, I actively just disengage from that. And that's one of the ways I try and be sustainable, by not just buying mindlessly. Another thing I try and do that I think is really important is I try and actually fix things, because we can get things so easily. Like you can literally buy on an online retail platform like Amazon and you can get it same day. And I think because we feel that things can be so easily replaced, the things we have, we don't savor and value. Oh, this is broken. I can just literally get another one in 2 hours or maybe the next day. I think fixing things and mending things is important. And culturally, there are so many philosophies about imperfections and how imperfections give you beauty. So I'm a big fan of that. Like I will switch out a zip, I will change a hem. And that time doing that is time of peaceful reflection. It's actually time being creative and empowering yourself with your own creativity. So those are some of the ways I do it. And then another thing that I do that I think is really, really important is I'm in community with people. Like I'm in community with people all the time. I'm in community with people. I'm learning from them. I'm learning their cultures. I'm learning their ways. I'm sharing with community. I'm sharing everything from food and books to rides to places. And it's just like it's being in community with people. Oh, I'm with a friend. Oh, that's really nice. Oh, I'm done with this. You have it. It's just daily, intentional, mindful decisions that I won't become a victim of consumerism, but I will support the making of things that are better for people and planet.
So another thing that I try and encourage people to do with this
Mm,
podcast is to not have everything that they do be about their career, but
mm,
to support their health, to support their
mm,
relationships with family, to make
mm,
sure that they're having fun. So what are some things that you're doing on a personal basis to make sure that with all the success you're having, you're also taking care of yourself?
mm. I will be honest and say I'm only just getting to that space of knowing the things that truly helped me take care of myself. And the reason I distinguish is because I thought I knew what they were, but actually they've evolved past those things. I thought, oh, if I get enough sleep and if I drink enough water and if I commit to at least going outside and doing a walk a couple of, not if not every day, then a few times a week, those are the, but actually that's not what they are anymore. The things that I need to do that I'm really becoming aware of is I need to read. I have about 10 books I've bought, fictional books, romantic novels, all these different ones, escapism I haven't read. And that is something I need. I need to delve into or find my way into these worlds that have been created that take me out of these thoughts about, because there is an element of anxiety that sometimes comes with working in sustainability, especially around climate and biodiversity loss when you know the stats. So that's one thing I need. I need to read and I need to have escapism through novels and things. I also need to laugh. So I'm open to any
Yes.
comedian recommendations. I need to laugh heartily. Do you have any?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, behind me, I have Jerry Seinfeld with a signed photo. I've got one I really love is Gary Goldman. Have you heard of
Oh,
Gary
nice.
Goldman?
Yes, I have.
Have you seen
Nice.
his special, The
I
Great Depression?
No, I haven't. I haven't. How is okay? I'm gonna have to make a note of that one.
Okay.
Okay, that's
That is
good.
one of the most, it's really funny, but it's also one of the most powerful pieces I've seen about mental health. And
Oh
as someone
wow.
who has dealt with some pretty significant mental health issues,
Hmm.
it's absolutely amazing. I love everything Gary Goldman does. And Joe Pera is somebody I like. He's an acquired taste. You might not like him,
Okay.
but I'm gonna just give that
I'm.
preface. I'm actually going to quote him at the end of this because it relates to something you just talked about. Because I
Thank
find
you.
inspiration with what I do in comedians. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I mean,
Uh,
I just love it. I mean, I just remember I have early memories of my dad bringing Eddie Murphy's Raw and just laughing
oh
so
yeah,
hard, and then like Sebastian Maniscalco, like there's just I have just this range
yeah.
of people that just make me laugh to like cry, and Mo Amma. So I just that's another thing I need to do, and probably the other thing is I just need to spend quality time with my family and friends and be in those conversations. I've had so many years of having people talk to me and I'm not fully present in the conversation because I'm thinking of all of these other things I should be doing or could, oh, I need to get that done. I need to get that done. Oh, my mind's going in all of these other places and I'm not present in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that I've done that for these conversations because I felt that I'm here and I'm interacting, but there's all these other things that are in the back of my mind that I'm trying to process. And I missed gold. I missed moments to deepen those relationships. But now I'm aware of it. I have a more strategic way of being present with the conversations I'm having. And if I do that, then I don't feel isolated. I don't feel alone. And that can be a wave that comes over me sometimes as well. So thank you for sharing about your mental health challenges because mine has probably been around isolation sometimes and feeling alone. But if I could
Yeah.
just be aware in the conversations I'm having that someone's sharing with me because they want to share with me and I can be vulnerable with them, then that helps me kind of keep myself in a good space.
I made a note. I just made a note to have my assistant Victoria send you a copy of my book, The Power of Having Fun.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic. Thank you.
yeah, and part of what I talk about that is about personal sustainability and the fact that
Nice.
you do more, you're more successful, you're more productive
Mm,
when you take meaningful breaks. I call them oases. I just got off
mm,
of my month
nice.
long oasis, but you don't have to take a month.
Yeah.
Just 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there make a huge difference. So I'll send that
Thank
to you
you.
because and here's the thing too, you're doing such great work,
Thank
you're
you.
helping make things more sustainable. So we need Samata to be sustainable. We want you to have the energy and the longevity and the ability to keep making that impact in the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We actually have to hear
Yeah.
this stuff. So, I mean, anyone in my space, we need to hear these things just to remind us, even though we know, we just need to keep hearing it because you can burn out. So, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? Is it more of the same, or is there going to be a different chapter in your life, you think?
Well, so I've just founded my own cultural sustainability organization called Black Pearl. It's actually the first time I've actually mentioned it in an interview. And
Oh,
I think, yes, and
we
I'm
got the
just,
scoop.
you got the scoop. And I'm just really excited about it because I'll be doing more of the work I love around culture and sustainability, but I'll also be doing more storytelling. I've written over the years in my weekends and on holidays, I'd write ideas about content like, oh, that would be a really great TV show, or oh, that would be a really great this. And I've written content. So I think communicating with people through media, going into their homes, having something where someone flicks onto Netflix and they're watching a TV show or docuseries that I've written would be a dream come true for me. So there's the media side of it, but I'll keep going with the education, the thought leadership, the red carpet type of work. I still love that. And then also, I just hope to be healthier in mind, body, and spirit. So I think it's a constant journey. So I hope that I'm, even kind of resting even more, making sure I'm eating really, really well, spending good time with friends and family, and making sure that my mental and physical health is in a good space as much as possible. So those are kind of humble goals, but that's what I would love.
Well, I think those sound fantastic. I think you're
Thank
going
you.
to knock it out of the park. So here's the part in the podcast where I pause to wrap things up, because I tell people who listen to this show, it's not about the knowledge. It's not about hearing Samata's story, as wonderful as it is. It's about the action that you take on it. What are you going to do? And so that you can make Samata a part of your life forever. If you do just one thing, something you heard from her, and make it a part of your life, then she's going to be a part of your life forever. So here's what happens, Samata. I'm going to share 3 principles. And I define a principle as something that's immediately actionable that I picked up from your story. And then I'd like you to share 1, if you want to do 2, of things that someone who's listening to this can do today or tomorrow. Not next week, not a month from now, but immediately.
Okay.
So
I love that.
I'm going to start with the concept that you brought up of an incubator. And the idea of creating that nurturing environment, and how your mentor helped create that environment for you, where it was safe to say whatever you needed to say. It was safe to ask questions. And I think that someone listening to this, if they're a leader, you can do something to create more of an incubator environment. But if you're not a leader, you can create an incubator for yourself. Just create a space and a time where you're giving yourself permission to think whatever you need to think and make mistakes. And I think that will definitely move you forward toward whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
The second principle is to think more like an entrepreneur. And you brought up the idea of how they do more with less. And they have that confidence that with whatever they have, they can find a solution to something. And I think a lot of people listening to this might be dealing with something that they're struggling with. They can't find an answer. And I know I've had in the past, before I was following principles of success, where I would think someone's going to rescue me. Someone's going to take care of this. Someone's going to give me the money I need, whatever it is. When instead the question we need to ask is, how can I solve this with what I have right now? And look for those solutions, because you have them, whoever's listening. And the last one, I want to call out that principle of discernment. The idea of being aware when you're being actively sold to, whether that's online, whether that's at the store. And so here's where I'm going to quote a comedian, Samata. One of my favorite shows is Joe Pera Talks with You. And Joe Pera is like the Mr. Rogers of comedians. And there's a scene, and again, he's an acquired taste. I know not everyone likes him. I absolutely adore him. And there's a scene where he's going through a grocery store, and he said, I like to ask myself 3 questions before I buy something. First question, should I eat this? Second, will I eat this? And 3, can I afford this food?
That's good.
And if the answer is yes to all 3, then I buy it. And he picks up a thing of bananas and puts it in his cart. And I think just that idea of just being more thoughtful with our purchases, rather than just flying through and clicking buy and put in cart or whatever it is, we just pause and think, I think you can adapt that. Should I buy this? Will I use it? And can I afford it? And, also thinking like, was this made sustainably, right? Just pausing and thinking about that. I think that's something all of us can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you add to the possible principles that someone could follow here, Samata?
I would say, who have I always been? So, one of the things that I realized as I kind of progressed through this journey is a lot of the things you said at the beginning of our conversation. Actually, you said, well, a lot of the things that you're saying is kind of what you're doing now. And I think if everyone
Mm-hmm.
has that moment of just reflection of what were some of the things that made me who I was when I was younger, what were the things that meant something to me, you'll more often than not find this way to connect back to like choices and thought processes of impact. Like, how can I make this skirt that exists in my wardrobe so I can't get another one, and this thing that's in that corner different? What can I do to change that and kind of make it feel more me? I've always been that person. And I think now it just has a different word. Now it has sustainability and upcycling, but it was something I always did. So I think sometimes looking back at the things that always made us special and unique, or things that always made us aware of who we are, can still help us going forward. And I think there's something quite fun in rediscovering, like looking at old photos of yourself and being like, wow, I really used to love that thing. What was it about that thing?
Yeah.
It can awaken something in you that makes you feel like that inner child. Because I think we sometimes have this thing about this inner child that's like immature. But I think there's something about the inner child that is renewing, that is affirming, that is important, because our inner child is who we were before all of these other messages started coming to us, telling us we couldn't be this person, we can't do this thing, you're not allowed to be that, who do you think you are to think you can go for that? That inner child still felt they could be all of those things. So when we look at that person and try and remember things, we also remember things about ourselves. That's what I would say.
I love that. Just be aware of who you are, who you've always been, and find a way to connect that to whatever it is you're doing now. I think that's fantastic. Samata, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been really useful.
Good. Thank you for having me. Yeah. I've loved speaking to you. I can't wait to go and look at the books you've recommended, the comedians you've recommended, and all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you, everyone who's been listening to this. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being involved in this. And remember, it's not about the knowledge, it's about what you do. So make sure you go and do something. Today, tomorrow, do something about what you've learned from Samata, and you'll make her a part of your life forever. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Sound editing was done by my brother Stratton Crenshaw. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.